special counsel Jack Smith closing in on Trump. We have witnesses being brought in who were close to the president at the time he was president on January 6th. NBC reporting White House aide William Russell, who's with the Trump campaign today, is also testifying today. He already testified before the grand jury. They're bringing him back for follow-up. That is consistent with the reports from both Donald Trump and others that he got the target letter and that the indictment is looming. We're also getting potential additional details or clarity on what the charges could entail. Yesterday, several outlets, including NBC, was reporting that Smith is eyeing conspiracy and witness tampering charges. Those are pretty straightforward. If you watched the show last night, we discussed some of that. And then possibly a third charge. And the details on that, according to the New York Times, are that the third statute might actually be a civil rights law that's previously been used in voter fraud cases. Conspiracy against rights. If two or more persons conspire to injure, threaten, or intimidate a person in the exercise of a constitutional right. Now, that statute actually enacted after the Civil War. It was when the feds were trying to go after certain white supremacists, including the KKK, who were breaking the law to try to stifle black voting. In the modern era, it's also been used broadly, including in cases regarding voter fraud conspiracies. That's the latest on this story that continues to show that Jack Smith is serious about potentially issuing a second federal indictment of Donald Trump. And, as we've been doing, as this story has heated up, we begin one-on-one with lead-off guests who can walk us exactly through the law. David Kelly, former SDNY chief, and I should mention my former boss, is with us tonight. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Timing. Everyone wants to know. Nobody knows exactly. But what do you see as Jack Smith's likely path here?
Hard to say. That the tea leaves get a little confusing. So on one hand, he apparently or reportedly gives an offer to the former president to come in and testify like right away, which suggests sooner rather than later. But other reports are that witnesses are still being scheduled a month out. Now, once an indictment is issued, it really kind of limits the ability of a prosecutor to issue grand jury subpoenas without explaining that it's an ongoing investigation that goes beyond the charges in the indictment, because you can't use a grand jury subpoena as a kind of a trial prep tool. So if these witnesses are perceived to be important, and somebody like Bernie Kerik reportedly being one of them, probably an important witness, it may be a month out. Or more.
Right. And so you have everyone sort of excited, and we understand that. But as you say, there's a certain hints from the process. Then you have them bringing back witnesses. What do you read into that?
Kind of tying up loose ends and trying to compare and contrast what other witnesses say, and maybe trying to refine what a witness may have previously said once they've heard from other witnesses, that it may have opened up a little bit of gap that they want to close. I didn't get to ask question of witness A, and now I've heard from witness B that there is that issue. So we have to go back to A and kind of nail that down.
Yeah, and now that we've seen this preview, and again, we caution, we don't physically have the target letter, let alone the indictment, but we've seen at least a preview that gives the outline of abusing power and conspiring to steal the election up to and around the 6th. I have a question, but you look like you want to get in. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what I find interesting is that I think most people, including myself, looked at this as, kind of leading or inciting the storm on the Capitol.
Right.
And from this report, it makes it even a more interesting case, because by going and nailing down the electors from all the different disputed states, it makes it a much broader, more interesting case of trying to deprive people of their civil right to have their vote counted. Which is much different than just the obstruction charge of obstructing an official proceeding, which many of the January 6th protesters have already been charged and many convicted with.
Well, that's very important, and that, we've discussed this on the show multiple times, because what we learned was how big and really complex the different plots ran. It would seem to me, and again, caveat, we got to get the indictment, but it would seem to me, based on these charges and these clues, that Jack Smith's building a case that would argue, even had there not been a violent insurrection, there were other, he would argue or charge, crimes committed by this president, because there were other concrete actions and fraud taken to interfere with or stop the transition of power to the lawfully chosen president-elect.
I completely agree with that. And from a jury appeal perspective, though, by having the riot, the insurrection, if you will, as part of that case, it adds a much it's much more flavorful, if you will, and more interesting for a jury than kind of the more intangible,
right.
I would say, kind of the election fraud, having people sitting in the basement of the State House in Michigan and signing false election certificates.
I think you're absolutely right, and that goes to, we talk about whether you have a case, do you have a good case, what does it mean when people like you sat in that chair and decided we can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, is different than we could teach this in law school, right? And these are big calls. Jack Smith has staked his entire legal career on what he says is the independent right thing, but we would expect he doesn't want to lose either of these cases. Lastly, you mentioned Michigan. What does it mean for America, David? Sometimes we go big. I ask you the big question. What does it mean for America that local prosecutors are also stepping up and saying, regardless of what happens, or even if Trump beats the case and is reelected, whatever, it also matters that this was, according to the Michigan prosecutors, also fraud that must be stopped at the local level?
It's incredibly important because, democracy is not just a federal issue. It's a state issue. It's a local issue. And that is a direct assault. If the allegations prove to be true, it's a direct assault on the democracy as it functions in Michigan and its towns and villages. It's incredibly important that it be enforced at all levels.
Person spending over $40 billion on something. You can bet his interest goes well beyond tweets or a personal hobby or even going viral. Twitter matters more for its impact on the world than any particular tech it has or even its revenue. And so that's where we begin tonight. You think about those old rules that try to limit how many newspapers one company can own or how much media one company can own in a town, and it reminds us the sense of sheer power of one person owning this platform that shapes media, perception, even potentially elections in many different countries around the world. And there were signs that Musk was doing this, taking this giant bet, spending all of this money and time and energy on Twitter. And he was doing it for his own self-interest and power. And as we've documented before, at the same time, he's a shrewd marketer. So he didn't say, hey, I'm doing this for me. He pitched his takeover to American audiences as a kind of public service for free speech, or even selective right-wing claims about free speech. And then he vowed to save and improve Twitter as a company. Okay, we've reported on this before. Tonight we have some really significant updates, because it's about 8 months later. What's happened? Well, Twitter is now worth roughly half of what Musk paid for it. Traffic to the site, which is the bread and butter and lifeblood of any website or app, is tanking. And the accounts that do use the platform are posting less. Many of Musk's pledges have come up short. It's disappointing even the conservatives who had cheered the promise of Musk advancing free speech.
I think it's very important for there to be an inclusive arena for free speech. It's just really important that people have both the reality and the perception that they're able to speak freely.
For once, this isn't about power and money. Musk is doing it to save free speech.
It's not an overstatement to say it could be the single most important development for free speech in the modern history of the United States.
This is a guy who's made a lot of money. He's been very successful. Loves this country and the freedoms it affords.
The first thing he's going to do is establish free speech there.
Okay. There was a lot of talk like that, as you saw from Musk and his fans, and we're just going to look at the record, because anyone is free to love America and free speech. And while Musk rushed to pick sides in American politics, he attacked Clinton, he buddied up to Ron DeSantis, he invited Trump back on Twitter, he fast-tracked a later collaboration with Tucker Carlson. That's all fine. Do what you want. But when you widen out beyond Musk's chosen political spats, what he wants you to focus on or be distracted by, and look at the full record of Twitter around the world, under Elon Musk, the company caves to censorship requests by authoritarian governments. It censors, bans, or removes content critical of the ruling parties in Turkey and India, for example. Now, that is something the previous leaders of Twitter have also done, along with other social media companies. But let's go a little bit deeper. Twitter does it more under Musk. In the year before his takeover, Twitter agreed to about half of government censorship requests that it got. That number now up to 83%, significantly higher in Musk's first 6 months. Now, Elon Musk does not deny this. Instead, the self-proclaimed free speech protector says he's just doing what he's told by the dictators. Quote, "We can't go beyond the laws of a country." And as the right-wing applause has faded, even some conservatives are now hitting him for, quote, "bowing down to dictatorship." That's a Fox News item right there. Musk has proven to be, at best, a fair-weather fan of free speech and a free press. He turned on the free speech of the journalists when he opposed some of what they said. He banned them from Twitter and later reinstated them. He also trolls and plays games, which is designed to sort of confuse people or distract from things I just showed you, like the data of the measurable rise in Twitter censorship around the world. So, for example, he dived into a term that some progressives have used and tried to treat it as a kind of what he argued was hate speech or a slur. The Washington Post noting the self-proclaimed free speech absolutist declared the term cisgender to be a slur and threatened to suspend people who use the term on Twitter. Now, again, you can have a debate about all sorts of stuff, but the free speech absolutist telling you that he's now picking what words you can say and will ban you for them is obviously, well, contradicting himself. Now, Musk engages on those matters. He personally oversaw the firing or ousting of a lot of staff from the prior Twitter administration. And then there are business failures. Now, that's a problem for any company, but especially for free market conservatives who have argued the market is the judge of a leader like Musk. Well, the business of Twitter is cratering. This is the other update I mentioned. Musk fired or faced resignations from the majority of Twitter's staff, including the trust and safety team. There are company veterans who argue he basically was taking deliberate steps to invite or require that exodus. There are policies that disbanded a safety council that tries to address online challenges like alleged hate speech, child pornography, statements of self-harm. And there's early data showing the site has now seen this spike in hateful, violent, and inaccurate posts. Derogatory language, including the use of the N-word, has skyrocketed, which again is a contrast to Musk's apparent eagerness to troll or threaten to ban other words, but not get that one under control. Now, I want to be clear with you tonight. Whatever you think of Mr. Musk, and you can see his, well, contradictions or hypocrisy, some of these are complex and debatable issues for any publisher or social media company. Meaning, I'm not going to try to resolve them all with you this moment, but I will tell you this. The markets don't like what Musk is doing. They don't like the reality or perception that Twitter is more lenient towards hate speech or those problems. There are advertisers who are ditching new Twitter under Musk. Indeed, about a 50% plunge in ad revenue, which Musk concedes. And the company, like any company, can debate volatile and noisy valuations. But Musk says Twitter has lost over half its value since he bought it. So the business guru is not exactly delivering business results, which were much promised, and that undercuts some of the early right-wing buzz.
He's our Edison. This is our Thomas Edison. This is our Da Vinci of our generation.
He's draining the swamp of Twitter, and it needs to be drained, but the way that he's doing it, to me, is genius.
You know that he is a genius when it comes to Tesla and when it comes to SpaceX. When Elon comes in, he's going to have sophisticated data analysts.
It's just going to happen like that, right? Unless it's not. So why are so many people getting this so wrong? I mean, I just want to level with you. Part of what we're seeing on the right is a kind of partisan hero worship applied to a business leader. We all know how partisanship can work. Partisan fans get very biased towards their party or team, and that can put you in kind of a box. Those kind of blinders now being applied to shield Musk, a very rich, powerful man, from objective judgment from some of those quarters, even as independent experts see his leadership besieged by these missteps. And there's measurable failure. I mentioned traffic is tanking. The top voices who power a site like this are just using it less, posting less. And other users say they're just taking a break altogether from Twitter. Now, some of Musk's changes just didn't work. For example, he had the idea of charging for verification, basically taking something that was an authority system where you say, oh, that's really the person it says it is, or that's really the New York Times account, and putting it up for sale. Now, again, as with other things I've said tonight, whether you personally like that or care about that is one thing. But as a business, the market test has Musk failing. The market and users largely rejected that system. Many say it stoked confusion. And that's not just happening in a vacuum. The turmoil created an opening for a Twitter alternative. There are some startups out there like Blue Sky. Then there's the big incumbents like Mark Zuckerberg's company, which has now recently unveiled its alternative, Threads, which is a threat to Twitter. But now these two billionaires are getting in their bro bags, openly taunting each other about a physical fight. I can tell you that is really unfortunate. Some tech reporters are charting this as a kind of Musk tantrum or meltdown over all of the Meta competition. And at the most basic level, Musk looks weak, losing a popularity contest to Mark Zuckerberg and his 100 million new Twitter users on a non-Twitter. At a business level, let's be clear, Zuckerberg's company is not exactly innovating here. It is stepping into a void that Elon Musk created with all of those actions that had users and advertisers bailing. Threads' early success has nothing to do with Threads, argues NYU business professor Scott Galloway, citing instead the dysfunction at Twitter and noting Musk's behavior lowered the drawbridge and Zuckerberg walked through it. So that's the Elon Musk part. Now, he was also an effective entrepreneur and marketer with his other companies. Pointing out that Elon Musk's claims about Twitter and political free speech were off base doesn't mean he has no business acumen whatsoever. It just means his recent attempts to combine a right-wing partisan agenda with running this particular company is failing. There are also some wider trends. So to be accurate or fair, there's the point that Twitter is still built on the old arcane follow-based social network where users manually seek out accounts they want to follow, like Facebook. Tech writer Taylor Lawrence explains this. The most popular apps these days are not those kind. The new ones, like TikTok, deliver content to a sophisticated feed. Now, under that analysis, again, whether you use these social media devices or not, these apps or not, this is a big part of our world and our politics. The analysis there is that Facebook and Twitter are more like a library where you kind of have to walk your way through the aisles and work to pick out books. And TikTok is more like a modern TV that serves up all the shows, news, or fun you could want without any work, decisions, or thought. It just keeps coming at you. Now, the reach and control of these platforms matter for society and democracy. That's why they're on the news tonight, not because we're obsessed with Twitter on the beat. They matter to the new generation, to the young people, if you will, just like radio mattered to FDR or TV mattered to JFK. And when Kennedy mastered television, watch out, because there wasn't a politician that could really beat him in a televised debate. That may be why so many Republicans thought a Musk Twitter would not only help them go viral or dunk on their enemies or post trolling content, but it might help them win elections. In an environment where you might have noticed Republicans have struggled to win national elections. So they gave Mr. Musk a lot of latitude over these last 8 months. And what's he done with it? I showed you tonight. He's squandered it, a lot of it, on a path that has hurt his own credibility, his politics, and yes, his own finances.